This is an unwritten rule, and it's the greatest one we have. It's the rule of self-restraint, which we have very little of anymore.
Yes, the divisions run deep. Compromise is certainly challenging. But it would not serve a divided country if two factions take turns ruling over one another with an iron fist.
A months-long push to pass a bill lawmakers argue would keep American elections fair and free failed to move forward in the U.S. Senate. The defeat was largely expected after Democrats could not convince two members of their own party to get on board. An attempt to squash the Senate's filibuster rules was also shot down, and that means, at least for now, attempts to roll back a variety of Republican state laws that some say would suppress minority voter turnout are stalled. I spoke with Senator Tammy Duckworth about the bill and divisions inside the caucus just before this week's vote. Senator, thank you for joining me. Very much appreciated. I want people to understand this distinction in the voting rights bill, this stuff that's taking so much time. Democrats say, look, it's about guaranteeing people the right to vote. Republicans say, no, this is about making sure we stop fraud and people don't cheat. Who's right?
Well, as we've seen all across the country, there are Republican-controlled legislators who are passing these laws that really restrict the rights of largely Black and Brown communities from voting, and really to make voting even ever more difficult. And all we want right now is just let's have a debate and let's vote on it. Let's pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And the Republicans in the Senate won't even allow us to move to a discussion or a debate on it, let alone have to vote.
President Biden has said this isn't even about who gets to vote anymore, which has been the mantra people hear. He says this is about who's counting the votes. What does he mean?
Well, what he's talking about is that in many of the states are actually passing laws that says that the people who certify the election, whatever the count is, usually it's the governor and the secretary of state, they don't have to go along with the will of the people. So the will of the people could vote for a particular person, but the governor and the secretary of state say, well, you know what, here in Georgia, we really don't want Raphael Warnock to be our senator. These two, they could actually reverse and certify a different person or refuse to certify the person who actually won the vote of the people.
And so some would say, hey, look, states get to do what they want to do. They should run their own state elections. The feds should stay out of it. What do you say to them?
Well, there are some, I think, basic oversight that needs to happen from the federal level, like people should be allowed to vote. States should not be allowed to say only white men who own land can vote. So a lot of those types of laws are federal laws. States can run their own elections, but they can't run an election where it inherently discriminates against particular groups of people. And that's what we're seeing happening in Republican-controlled states all over this country. They didn't like the results of the election for Senate in Georgia. So what did they do? They changed the voting rights laws in Georgia. And we have to have a basic level here in this country of, everyone gets to vote, who's qualified to vote. You don't get to eliminate certain groups of people from voting just because they don't own land or they're Black or whatever that is. You can't do that.
I'm sure you may be familiar with the comments made by your colleague, Senator Joe Manchin, just the other day, because listening to what you're saying now, Senator Manchin said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but I'm being accurate here, when he goes, look, we don't have a problem. That's what the court systems are for. If there are problems or whatever, then the court system will make sure that everybody's protected.
Well, the problem that we have now, though, we saw this beginning with the Trump administration, is that they're using their control of the legislative process to control who gets on the judiciary, the bench, by blowing up the Supreme Court, for example, confirmation process to go from the 60 votes down to 51 votes. They were able to steal a seat that Neil Gorsuch now sits in, that President Obama nominated Merrick Garland for, and they refused to allow him to have a hearing or even a vote. And so you see that the vote is where the beginning of the protections of people's rights and people's freedom and our voices begins with your ability to cast your vote.
One of the reasons the Democrats find themselves here is because there are a couple of outlier Democrats who won't play along. Most people would say Mitch McConnell knows how to keep his party together almost always. Don't dare defy President Trump. You'll pay a price. Why don't Chuck Schumer or President Biden have the ability to do the same?
Well, we're a much more diverse party. And we do have lots of different voices, which is a good thing for the most part. I will say that it is very frustrating that Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema are refusing to put the good of the well-being of the people of this country over the rights of a single senator to mount a filibuster. All we're asking to do by changing this filibuster rule is to go from a secret filibuster, which is where it is right now. A single senator can say, I'm going to mount a filibuster, and then you can't even begin debate on a piece of legislation, and you can't even vote on the legislation. And let's make it an open filibuster. That is a talking filibuster. If you want to stop the legislation, come to the floor, talk about it. Tell us why you don't think this piece of legislation should pass. And it's unfortunate that Senators Manchin and Sinema are continuing to support this idea of a secret filibuster, which I don't think is good for our democracy. And it goes way back to the Jim Crow era when this process started.
Just out of curiosity, how do you think for Sinema and Manchin it plays at home when they say, oh, I completely support the voting rights, I just don't support changing the Senate rules. Just too bad we can't change the rules, but I do support the voting rights.
But they change the rules all the time. Recently, they allowed us to change the rules, and they voted to change the rules to pass the debt ceiling. You know, we passed the legislation to raise the debt ceiling, and that was agreed upon. We're going to change the rules for this one vote, and that's all we're saying is let's change the rules for this one vote, and then we'll vote. If you don't want to vote for voting rights, vote no on it, but at least let us have a vote on the floor.
Finally, if this doesn't pass, what do elections look like in 2022?
Well, what you're going to see is a lot of folks in 2022 being very frustrated in many parts of the country, Georgia, Arizona, many of the southern states where people think that they're going to be able to go vote and they're not going to be able to. They're going to be denied the ability to vote, or in many of these states, they have now made violation of voting procedures criminal. So for example, if you're, you know, if your signature on the outside of your absentee ballot doesn't match the signature on your absentee ballot request, you know, and that could be a problem. And so it's not just a mistake, now it's criminal. It's going to be very, very difficult for a lot of people to vote across this country come 2022 if we don't restore voting rights protection.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you for your time. We'll monitor the process as it goes, and we'll keep in touch with you.
Thanks for having me on.